So, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, Crystal, yesterday, as I watched the Dow Jones crater 3,000 points for the second largest percentage-based drop in American history, I realized something. That Generation Z would join our millennial brethren in entering adult life amidst an economic catastrophe. That the inadequacies of Washington will once again lay the groundwork for likely one of the largest populist uprisings in American history. Now, let me explain what I mean. I don't think that this will happen this election cycle. This cycle will all be focused on the response to coronavirus and the immediate efforts to contain it. Who got the most testing kits available? Who has the better immediate plan to help people? Who basically wants to direct resources to what state? That's important business. But what's more important is the quieter but more important debate that is what we all must do to lift ourselves out of one of the greatest economic calamities in American history. And to give everyone an idea of how far behind the curve we are, let me tell you what happened yesterday. Senator Mitt Romney shocked the political world by proposing that every single American citizen receive a $1,000 a month payment. Now, $1,000 a month, not $1,000 a month, just $1,000. People were shocked. Mitt Romney, of all people? The idea of a direct cash transfer was lauded. And if it passes, I'll be one of the first to applaud the first step. But the thing is, I know, as all of you do, how DC works, which is that a $1,000 check is very unlikely to be followed by more. And that by passing it, a lot of people can say that they did something pretty crazy to combat coronavirus, and they can just leave it at that. And as I tweeted in response to that proposal, the problem is that $1,000 barely scratches the surface. Tens of millions of Americans right now are staring down the barrel of rental costs, credit card payments, loans, and more. Even direct cash assistance at that level will simply be eaten up by the everyday costs of living that most Americans bear on a daily basis. A one-time cash injection or even a cash injection monthly would get eaten up by debt holders in our society. It just simply is not going to cut it if we actually want to get our economy working again. Or if you want, as I do, to step up to the plate and use this as an opportunity to say that if big business and others want our taxpayer dollars, then they have to behave by a certain set of rules. But you also know, as I do, that the political will, it's not there right now. Sure, we may pass a one-time payment for Americans, but the political will evaporate at the slightest sign of so-called progress. And the reason I'm so confident is because we have a template. And even worse, the same people are in charge. Nancy Pelosi at the helm, and if Joe Biden wins the presidency, the same people in charge of the White House as last time, give or take a few Wall Street people. Biden himself told us during the debate 2 nights ago.
Had those banks all gone under, all those people Bernie says he cares about would be in deep trouble. Deep, deep trouble. All those little folks, we'd have gone out of business. They'd find themselves in a position where they would lose everything that they had in that bank, whether it was $10 or $300 or a savings account. This was about saving an economy, and it did save the economy. And the banks paid back, and they paid back with interest. I agree with Bernie. Some of them should have gone to jail. That was the big disagreement I had in terms of bailing out. But the question was, they paid back. In addition to that, it also, part of that was bailing out the automobile industry, saving thousands of jobs, tens of thousands of jobs over time. He voted against that as well.
No. He's literally still defending the Wall Street bailouts that gave them all the short-term capital in the world while everyday homeowners got completely screwed in the long run. They did the bare minimum and acted like heroes. It's basically what we're in for this time around, regardless of who wins the presidency. Washington just does not have the courage or the will that it takes to remake the American economy, and they'll pass mealy-mouthed pieces of legislation that barely rise to the occasion of today, let alone tomorrow. What we need to do right now is alleviate the amount of debt that our working population is in. And what we need to do is set a standard right here, right now. If any corporation takes one U.S. taxpayer dollar, that they have to ensure their supply chains will move right back here to the United States and that American workers will benefit. What we need to do is set up systems that go around the employment structure so that tens of millions of people in this country who rely on the ad hoc gig economy can go to sleep at night at least. And unfortunately, that's probably not going to happen, which means we're about to become a pretty radical nation. 2 subsequent generations of young people are going to enter their adult lives in a catastrophic economic crash that reveals much more about who has power in this country and who does not. They're going to be laden down with debt, They'll face a struggling economy where jobs with benefits are going to be very, very scarce to come by. They'll scoff at the idea of owning a house or of getting married or starting a family, and they're going to rage silently inside. And that rage is going to fester as they age. As they start to vote, the rage is just the beginning. And just like that, the debt-laden millennial generation is going to be joined by their younger brothers, sisters, and cousins in Generation Z, and they're going to start embracing revolutionary politics. And it's going to have a huge impact on the future politics of this country.
I mean, I think that is so well said, Saagar. Because just think about young people who are graduating this year. What trajectory right now? I mean, what trajectory does that set their life on? Or people are graduating the year after that. And meanwhile, we know what these big corporations did with all of the tax cut money that they got. They didn't invest it in their workforce. They didn't invest it in America. They invested it in stock buybacks so that now, when it comes to a crisis, they have no cash on hand and they're already running to the federal government begging for a bailout. And we don't have to guess or wonder how this is all going to go. We already see it. They've injected $1.5 trillion into the stock market, right? We've already had quantitative easing. They've already cut interest rates to zero, all to try to calm the markets and make stockholders happy, shareholders happy. What have they done for workers? Next to nothing. A pathetic paid sick leave bill that leaves most of the workforce out. That's the best they can muster at this point. It's insane. And the fact that it would be a radical idea. I mean, I give Mitt Romney credit as well. Tom Cotton too who's been pushing, ideas like this. But that anyone would think it was a radical idea to give workers $1,000 at this point is out of their minds. It's going to take so much more than that for people just to be able to survive.
That's when I saw that, I realized what dire straits we're in, because we're going to fight endlessly over a one-time $1,000 payment. And I'm like, guys, the problem is so much big. It's so many orders of magnitude larger than what we're facing right now. We're talking about 3-4 years of which we're going to have to be able to pull ourselves out of this. We're talking about a restaurant and a service industry, which is going to need to be wholesale bailed out. We're not talking about just $1,000 payments. And what is interesting, I give one slice of hope out of this, Crystal, which is that, I mean, it won't be very hopeful to some of our viewers who are on the left, but the people who are leading the way for working families right now, GOP senators, Tom Cotton, Mitt Romney, Senator Josh Hawley just proposed large cash transfers to parents who are at home based on the number of children that they have, just so they can make sure that they meet their spending bills. This is what we need to actually be talking about, because what I laid out in the radar is what worries me, is that if we just start giving people $1,000, even $1,000 a month at that point, that is not enough that is only going to finance the debt holders in our society. It's not going to go into the actual consumer economy, because the consumer economy is shut down. So it's essentially, we're just going to be subsidizing these financial landlord, rentier class overlords that we have in our society. And instead, this is the thing, we need to start saying, okay, if we're going to subsidize big business and all of that, then they need to have certain deals that they make with the American people. They don't get to take our cash and continue to have their supply lines in China selling out American workers. If they're going to take this cash, then they're going to have long-term plans presented to us that their supply chains and everything else are going to be based right here, that they're going to hire Americans. And also, look, so we don't get into this mess in the first place. Why do you think we are where we are right now with masks? It's because of on-time delivery in so many of these hospitals. They click a button, 2 days later, it shows up. This is a public health and a national security crisis. So, but again, I'm very not optimistic, because I know that every single thing of what I am saying, each one of the discrete proposals that we're talking about here, that in and of itself is a titanic fight in Washington. Each one of those, there are armies of corporate lobbyists who are out there who want to defeat it.
Yeah, that is so, so true. And you know what? These people are going to long for the days of Bernie Sanders and his nice,
and Trump.
My good friend Joe and Don. I mean, truly, I have been saying this for so long. People lack the imagination to think of how much more radical things could get than Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. I mean, think about Bernie. What is he fighting for? It's like a standard issue program in any other developed country in the world. This is not crazy stuff that everybody should have health care. Every other country does that, right? That workers should make $15 an hour at least. You try living on $15 an hour. I mean, that's not easy, but at least it's a start. These are not insane things. And so it's not just our supply chain that is essentially just in time and hand to mouth. We have an entire nation that has been pushed with their backs up against the wall so that every single paycheck, every single hour is hand to mouth. And you go even a week without having that income regularly coming in. These are people that are struggling to put it all together, even in the best of times. It's absolutely insane. And this is where it's so important who politicians are accountable to and who they're listening to. Because who's been brought into the Oval Office this week? Who has the president and the administration been calling? They've been calling these CEOs, these bank executives to get their thoughts on what's the future for the economy and what should we be doing. Talk to workers, talk to labor. Sarah Nelson, friend of the show, who's the president of the Flight Attendants Union, she put out on Twitter very specific. Look, here is what is going on with our people and our workers, and here is what they need. Those are the people they need to be listening to, because I'll tell you, I'm sure you're already talking to people who are worried about, I just bought my first house and I don't know that I'm going to be able to make my mortgage payment. My car note is already late. I mean, that's where we are immediately. And the fact that Washington is still fighting over test kits at this point, I mean, in a lot of ways, that ship has already sailed, that they still haven't even been able to provide paid sick leave, unemployment, payroll tax cut. Like, these things are good if you have a job, if you work in the regular economy. But as you point out, what about all the people in the gig economy? And that's where the fact that we made our workforce so precarious comes back to haunt us in this moment.
It's just like 2008. We're squabbling over the bare minimum, the political fights and the amount of political capital just to do the bare minimum for what we need to do is so immense that talking about the structural changes that I am right now, that's out the window. So I'm thinking now of, I grew up with 9/11, Iraq, and then the financial crisis. Gen Z will basically have Iraq, the financial crisis while they're kids, and now the coronavirus economic crisis. And I don't want to sound so overly pessimistic, but we are creating the conditions for a huge uprising in 3 to 4 years. It is going to be, the economic conditions, it is a slow burn, because what they're going to do is they'll inject some cash and things will seemingly be fine for, just like in the crisis. And then you'll get to something like 2012 and people are looking around like, it's been 4 years and I'm still waiting for mine. I'm still waiting. And then you realize it's not coming. But all right, Crystal, I'm looking forward to your radar, and that's next.